Hello everyone, I made this tutorial for the Back to the Mac conference, for which I'll leave a link in the description below, but I felt that it worked well in the Cocoa series, and so it will be honorary tutorial number 90. The Big Sur updates will be coming this week, but in the meantime, enjoy. In this video, we're going to be talking about how we can create a custom search suggestions window similar to what you see on this right image over here, where we're going to type into an NS search field, and as we type, the suggestions that match the text that we've entered so far will present in this custom search suggestions window here. And I'm going to talk about how we can sort of get it to appear this way and present, or rather navigate about this window while keeping focus on our main window in the NS search field. So that is what we're going to be talking about today, and we're going to keep it relatively basic, and just so we can cover many of the core concepts behind this. So first off, I've gone ahead and created a simple Cocoa project. All of the source code will be linked somewhere in the descriptions, and you can follow along. I'll give a before and after so that you can pick between the two. But the setup that we have so far is quite simple, and I'm just going to go ahead and run the application so that you have an idea of how simple it really is. We really just have this search field here, this NS search field. There's nothing special about it really. And then there's just this results section. And the idea is that I'm going to be able to type into here, and the search suggestions window is going to come up, and I'll be able to select one of those suggestions. But right now, obviously, we don't have that. So what do I have so far? Well, we have the app delegate, which is doing a very simple job of creating a window controller and then showing that. The window controller that you see here is just this so far. Really, it's just these two outlets and this initializer to select the nib file. And the nib file looks like this. We just have this search field and these results. And the search field itself has some outlets connected, one being obviously from that window controller, but the other important one is that we've gone ahead and assigned the delegate back to the main window controller as well, so we'll be implementing some delegate methods for this NS search field. And the very last thing I've gone ahead and done is created this template table cell view. It's just a NS table cell view subclass, and it really doesn't do anything. It just has a nib and identifier specified for it. And then in the nib, we've just gone ahead and made a custom cell. And this cell, you can design however you want. This is what the individual rows are going to appear like in your search suggestions field. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about how we can actually build this suggestions window. So we're going to go ahead and create a new window controller. So I'm going to do Command N, new Cocoa class, and we want a new NS window controller. The window controller is going to be called suggestions window controller. And we'll go ahead and create a nib file to go along with that. And we'll save it in our project. All right, so here's our suggestions window controller. The first thing I'm going to go ahead and do is customize some things in this nib file. So I don't want there to be a title on this window, so I'm going to go ahead into our attributes inspector. We're going to disable show title bar, so it's going to have no title bar. And then we also, which is very important, we do not want it to be visible at launch. And so we want to deselect that option as well. And that's sort of a general thing that I do for pretty much all window controllers that I create, but this is actually quite important for this because it'll allow it to maintain some of its appearance. So we want to make sure we disable visible at launch. Okay, that should be pretty much all we want to do in that nib. And we're going to do the rest of the customization inside of the window controller itself. So in here, I'm going to go ahead and create a table view. So we're going to have a table view, and I'm going to just manually create one. And this is kind of, I don't know if I want to say it's a hack, but it's maybe not exactly the best way to do this, but it is actually a way that I find works pretty well, and it gives you a lot of behavior for free. So generally when you have an NS table view, you actually have it embedded in an NS scroll view and then a clip view, and then your table view is within that. And what I'm actually doing here is using a feature of the table view itself to just embed the table view directly into our view controller, so it's not going to have a scroll view or a clip view. And what this actually allows me to do is that the table view defines its intrinsic content size by its content. So if I actually have, say, 4 rows in the table view's intrinsic size is going to match to those 4 rows, and it'll actually expand the window to match the size of the table view as long as I set up my constraints to be pinning that way. So I'm going to use the table view, and this gives me things like selection and just populating the table view. It gives me a lot of things kind of for free, whereas if I had to do this in different ways, either just manually or maybe using a stack view, I'd have to manage selection and various other things that I get for free in the table view. Again, not 100% sure that this is the best way to go about it, but that's the way I'm going to show it in this video, and I think it works pretty well. But feel free to find something to disagree about there. All right, so to set up an NS table view without a nib or anything like that, we have to add a table column. So we go ahead and make an identifier for this, as user interface item. I'll just call it main, doesn't really matter. And then I'm going to use automatic row heights, and you don't have to do this. You could just manually set it to be something, but I'm just going to allow it to adjust as I change my table cell view nib. I'm going to register that nib file as well, so I have those outlets, or those properties rather, on my table cell for the nib and for the identifier. All right, and then the last thing, of course, is to assign the data source and the delegate, and then we'll return this table view. All right, so we're just lazily instantiating a table view here, and I'm going to go ahead and add extensions for doing these kind of things. So we're going to have the suggestions window controller for an NS table view data source, and then another one for the delegate. All right, so now we're good to go. We have those two implemented. Let's go ahead and add one other thing here, which is our initializer for creating our nib, or our suggestions window with the nib. So this is something I do for basically every window controller that I create. I just kind of override the standard init, and then we just want to do some standard initialization things. I'm just going to go back to this guy and just actually copy the implementation that I have, because it's what I do in all of them. All right, so now that we have that, we're going to go ahead and implement what we want for our table view suggestions. So what I'm going to base this entire thing on is some suggestions that we're going to end up injecting into our suggestions window controller. So everything that's just displayed on our suggestions window controller is just going to be these suggestion strings. And your data model can be something different if you want. But for me, in this tutorial, it's simply going to be an array of strings. Now we'll go ahead and implement our data source for this. So we have our number of rows, and this is simply going to be our suggestions count, so the number of suggestions that we have. And then the other one that we need to implement is to actually display the cells. So table view, view for this guy here. So table view, view for row. And we just want to create the table cells that are going to be applied to this. So we go ahead and say guardlet view. All right, so now that we've done that, we can go ahead and set up our view here. And I've gone ahead and just used the standard text field property. That's what we linked up in our table cell view. So just so that was clear, our table cell view has this property called text field, and I've gone ahead and linked that up to this text field or label that I've added into this custom view. All right, let's go back into our suggestions here. So I'm just going to apply that string value directly. You can change this how you want. Maybe you want to have a specific property so that you're not just guessing in the wind that the text field property exists, but for simplicity's sake, it works for us. All right, and then we'll just return that view. So we've gone ahead and set up everything that we need to for how the table view is going to behave. Now we just have to actually define how it appears on screen. And I'm going to do that in our window did load function here. So pretty straightforward. We just want to basically go ahead and add the table view to the content view. So we'll say guard let, and I'm going to get the content view of this window, just because the window is not, it's optional. So I want to make sure that I actually have it, which I should, but just to make sure, or just so that I don't have to use optionals. All right, so now we can say the table view. I'm actually going to put this in the definition. So it translates, I'm going to say false. And this is obviously so that we can set up, I'm just going to go ahead and put that in here. All right, so now we have our table view kind of ready to go. I'm just going to add the table view to the content view. And then from here, we're just going to set up the layout constraints. So layout constraints, activate, and I'll just go ahead and skip forward on this so that you can see the final result. All right, so now that we have our table view all added to the view, constraints added, we're all set to go. The last things that we want to do are actually specify how the main window controller can inject or control the suggestions window control, right? Obviously, the main window controller is where the search field comes from, and it's going to have to define when we present the suggestions window controller. So a method that I'm just going to go ahead and paste in here, and I'll explain how it all works out. So we have this show suggestions method, and I have one other method I'm going to add in here, which is order out. And order out is really just, it's a convention for NS window, obviously. But what I want to do in this one is actually deselect any selection that I might have on the table view, and then we're just going to order out the window that I have. Okay, so the show suggestions call is pretty simple. It takes an array of strings, which are our suggestions, and then it takes a text field that it's going to use to present basically where it's going to present the window. And you don't really have to have specifically an NS text field. It can really be any control, but that's just how I've defined it here, as we're going to have an NS text field. And in our case, we're using an NS search field, which is just a subclass of NS text field. So if we pass in an empty list of suggestions, it means we have nothing to suggest, so we should just order out or not show this window. In the case that we have some kind of suggestions to show, we're going to save that into our property that we have up here, right, our suggestions. And then we're going to do some sort of math magic here to lay out the window properly. And I'm just going to kind of walk through this because it's all things that you can kind of figure out on your own, but it is just kind of lengthy to just type out. So really what we're doing is we're getting the window that the text field is in, and then we're grabbing just a reference for our own window. And what we're trying to do is convert basically we need to get the text field on the main window that we're passing in here. We need to get its coordinates in screen space so that we can present our suggestions window on top of that in the same coordinate space. So we're going to convert, first of all, the text field's bounds to the window. So that's going to convert it into the window coordinates, right? And then we're going to take those coordinates, right, of the text field. We're going to then convert that into screen space. So we take the text field window, convert that into screen space, and now we have that window. And then we're defining, I'm just putting a little padding in here because we're going to have the focus ring around the text field, so it just looks a little nicer to have it a little bit below that focus ring. So it's going to just be an arbitrary spacing down. And then we're setting the top left point of the window. This is our suggestions window that we're presenting. We're just saying that the top left point of that should match just below the text field. And that's where this rect origin comes in. Once we've done that, I want to say that the frame for the suggestions window is going to match the length of the text field. This is totally arbitrary. It doesn't have to do this, but it's just a convenient thing to do. Is I just want to take the text field's width and just match our suggestions window so that it's going to appear that. Now, this is the key point that matters here on how we actually present our suggestions window is we want to add it as a child window, and it's going to be ordered above the current window that we have. So by adding it as a child window above the existing window, what this allows us to do is it will present the window right on top of our main window, but it also means that it'll stay there. And it'll also stay there for when we do things like expose or we move our main window around. The child window will always stay in place, which is a great behavior to have when we're doing something like this. And then lastly, we're going to reload the table view so that it can reload the new suggestions that we just set up here. Okay, so that is everything for showing our window. Now let's figure out how we can actually go about showing the window when we type in the search field. So like I said, our search field has a delegate property that we've assigned to our main window controller. And so we're going to go ahead and set up that delegate setup here. So let's go ahead and have another extension on our main window controller. And the delegate is going to be the NSControl text editing delegate. Now, this delegate really applies to a number of controls that can edit text, but we're just using it for the case of our search field. And the most basic one that I want to implement is when the text changes. So there's a control texted change notification. And when the text changes, I simply want to change the suggestions window to match whatever the text is in the search field. So we're going to get some filtered suggestions. And I'm using this method that I've already gone ahead and created. You can kind of run through that method if you want, but it's pretty straightforward. It just takes an input string, goes through the suggestions that we've predefined here. Obviously, these would probably come from some kind of database that you'd have, but it's pretty easy to just define them here. And then it's going to just filter them by looking at the beginning and then doing a case-insensitive search to match any of the items that are in this array. All right, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to just do suggestions for, and then I want to get the string from our search field. And once we've done that, now we can create our suggestions array, our suggestions view controller. So we'll do suggestions window controller, and we'll just create a suggestions window controller like this. And we have that method that we just created to show the suggestions. So we're going to pass in the filtered suggestions, and we're going to pass in the text field that is presenting this, which is our search field in this case. And that's it. So we should be good to go. Let's go ahead and try and run this again. Make sure that everything behaves as we expect. So some of the strings that we have we have an A, a bunch of B's. So if I go ahead and type in a B, we can see that, ta-da, we get our various suggestions. Now I can't actually mouse down, or not mouse down, but key down to get to those suggestions, which would be nice. I want to basically hit the down arrow key to select different ones. But we can see that if I click on a variety of them, the window looks appropriate, right? Our main window still keeps its sort of key status, and we have this nice blue selection on the items in our window. And you can see that the window perfectly matches to the number of suggestions, right? If I switch it to A or switch to B or L, right, we are going to match the number of suggestions that are available to that. So we can see that it's mostly working. We just have a few extra steps to go. So the next thing we want to do is implement the ability to arrow down or arrow up so that we can actually select these various options. So to do that, we want to implement another mechanism here, which is another part of this delegate call. And this is control do command. These both look the same to me, but hopefully this is one. So control text view do command by and some given selector. And this method is going to allow us to interpret when we get a given command sent to the search field. We get the chance to actually interpret that in this delegate call. So this is great because what we want to do is we want to be able to detect when we get move up or move down events sent to the search field. So to do this, we can say if command selector is equal to, and I'm going to say selector, move down. I'll just do move up first, since it's a little more logical perhaps. And then I want to do the same for move down. All right, so in the move up case, we're just going to tell our suggestions window controller that we want to move up. And move down case, we're just going to basically forward that command on as well to the suggestions window controller, right? So that's what we need to do here. When we have said that we implemented these, we simply return true. And in the cases that we don't, we're just going to return false. All right. So the next step here is to actually implement a move up and move down on suggestions window controller. And I'm just going to go ahead and do those quickly and show you the end result. All right, so I've gone ahead and implemented the move up and move down. They're pretty straightforward. We're just interpreting basically where we are in the table view selection. And if we do a move up, we're going to go back a row. And if we move up, we're going to move up a row. And of course, we always want to stay within the bounds of where the table view is currently valid. So if there's only 4 suggestions, obviously we want to keep between indexes 0 and 3. And so that's what this logic here is doing. So with that in place, we can go back to our main window controller, and we're going to say suggestions window controller, move up, and in the case of moving down, we're going to say move down. All right, so let's go ahead and try that out to make sure that all works as we expect. So if I type in a B and I hit the down arrow key, we can see that now I can select any of the options that are within this area. Right. Some important things to note is that if I hit the escape key and then I type B again, right now the selection goes away. That's because we deselect when we order out that window. So we want to make sure that our selection is always, fine, but it should always be okay as long as we're doing a reload data. That should clear out the selection anyway. But that's pretty much that. The last thing that we want to try and implement is how we can actually select any of these items. So when I hit the return key, it is kind of expected that I would fill in the results, and I want to put the results right in the middle of the window here. And I also want to fill in the results in the search field as well. So how do we implement that? Well, the same way that we have implemented the last few things as well. So we can say if command selector is equal to selector, and in this case, we want to implement the basically when we insert a new line. So there's insert new line, and that's the equivalent of when we return. And what we're trying to do ultimately here is we want to get whatever the current suggestion is that the window controller is obtaining. So to do that, I'm just going to dive into our suggestions window controller, and we simply want to grab whatever the current suggestion is. So we're going to make a property here called current suggestion. And the current suggestion is optional because perhaps we don't have anything selected, but we want to just figure out whatever the selected row is. And we'll find that by doing, I don't want to do that. I want to just get the table views, selected row. And in the case that the selected, selected row is fine. Selected row, we want to make sure that we have something selected. So first we're checking to see if it's -1. -1 is the way AppKit indicates whether there is no selection. So if there is no selection, it should be nil. If there is a selection, then we're simply going to get the suggestions and take the selected row from that. All right, let's go back to our main window controller now, and we can get our suggestions window controller, the current suggestion, right? And so in this case, we want to basically just grab that current suggestion. So, there's different ways that we could do this. I guess we could just treat it as an optional, but basically I'm just going to say that I want to make sure that we have a suggestion. And if we don't, I'm just going to return false. All right, so now assuming that we do have a suggestion, what I want to do is I want to fill in the search field, and I'm going to set its string value to be the suggestion value. And I also want a results label, which is that label in the middle of the screen, to also have this suggestion. And once we've done that, we'll return true. The last thing I also want to do here is once I've selected a result, I want to get rid of the suggestions window. So I'm going to say suggestions window controller, and we're just going to order it out. So that'll get rid of the window. All right, let's go ahead and run this baby one last time and see what we get. So I can type in a B, I can arrow down, I can arrow up, I can select any of these results. So if I hit return, now we can see that the result is filled in on the search field and also filled in on the label below. All right, I hope this helps you understand how we can do different things with these sort of custom windows. The key here is that we're adding a child window. So when I type something, right, we're adding a child window. We're customizing how we want it. We could go further and customize its appearance more. We could curve the sort of edges on the window and make it look a little more sort of menu-like, and totally up to you. But the same rules sort of apply. You basically do all the same stuff, except you'd have a window that had curved edges. And yeah, so we add the child window. Again, the child window is important because this allows it to keep sort of this status where it's just in front. And then if I did expose with this window, right, we can see that the suggestions window goes with the window. It doesn't split off into its own window. And so the child window is the key here. And also so that when we're setting up our window controller, we also want to make sure that the window is not visible at launch and that we've gotten rid of the title bar. So those are sort of the main key components that we have here. And I hope you guys learned something from this. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel, give this video a like, and share it with your friends. Ways to contribute and additional information are in the description. I'll see you next week.